Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're just doing a bit of a different one again. We're on the move, but we're going to be chatting Wolves, we're going to be chatting the window so far and whether people should be panicking or not. So let's get straight into it. I've said many times, Wolves need numbers, that's no secret. They need 3 or 4 in the door really before the end of the window. They needed, I think they needed 2 or 3 before Manchester City, to be honest, but that doesn't look like that's going to happen now really. I know it's only Tuesday, so fortunes could change, but I'm not overly optimistic that there's any links. There's not any real sort of chat. There's not any real sort of convincing links anyway, and things that are necessarily going to come off in Wolves' favour. So generally I think they could be in trouble again, but again I feel like I'm talking about the window every day at the minute, and it's quite draining. But the whole point of this video was to discuss, you know, why Wolves shouldn't panic as well, because I think it's key that when you look at all of the windows, it's so important that Wolves don't panic. Now, Brentford, it looks like they might be getting Dango Ouattara in, and they also looks like they might be getting Kalimuendo in, so I think they're probably out of trouble now, to be honest. Obviously, Kalimuendo from Stade Rennais, a top signing, top player, and someone that I think massively improves Brentford. So for me, Brentford won't be in any sort of trouble next season. The only unknown with them is, of course, Keith Andrews being manager. But again, I think they'll be relatively fine. Keith Andrews is highly rated in the game. He always has been highly rated in the game. Not necessarily as a player that much, but in terms of his coaching, his management and stuff like that, he's always been quite highly rated really. So I think for me, he's no worry. Brentford are no worry now for themselves. More of a worry for Wolves, I think, because that's another team that I don't think will be in and around it now. Obviously could, you know, still lost Thomas Frank and Bumo Vissa, so it's still a big loss. I'm not saying it's not, but I do think that they'll be less in trouble than people think. West Ham, quite an underwhelming window in my opinion so far. Haven't really bought in that much. The team, you know, not particularly great really. But Nicholas Füllkrug will be playing for them next season more consistently up front, so you know I could see him doing really well. So again, for West Ham, no team that's got Jared Bowen in their side is going down. I think it's really as simple as that, to be quite honest. Lucas Paquetá's staying as well, looks like, and generally West Ham will be fine, but they're still, you know, they're not 100% safe, but I do think they're probably as good as. And then when you look at the rest of the windows, I mean, Everton was one that I really wanted to discuss in this video. You will have seen it in the thumbnail as well. As like, you know, for Everton, they've brought in some real quality. Kieran Dewsbury-Hall's a really decent signing for that level. Jack Grealish, of course, a brilliant signing, and someone that, again, I mean, £50 million buyout clause. Even if they, you know, even if he's not unbelievable, 50 million for Grealish is still really decent, I think, in this current market anyway. So again, for Everton, I think, you know, I was massively concerned about them, and this thumbnail was made a few weeks ago really, when Everton were, you know, massively in amongst it. They'd signed Thierry Barry, but no one else. And then now they've signed Dewsbury-Hall, they've signed Grealish, Asnu as well for Bayern Munich. So generally, I think Everton have strengthened as well, and they're the one that, for me, I was never worried about them going down. I actually think they'll be closer to a European push or to a top 10 finish. So again, for me, Everton aren't a worry, but I think they probably should have been, or would have been, a few weeks ago, when David Moyes was calling for signings. But doesn't look like that's going to happen now. I think he's going to get the players he wants through the door, and ultimately has got the players he wants through the door. And then, obviously, of course, Crystal Palace, as you can also see in this thumbnail now. Yesterday, Steve Parish confirmed that Mark Gahey is one of these players that they're going to have to, at some point, take money for this summer, whether that be from Liverpool or someone else. But again, he said we can't, you know, afford to lose £40 million, £50 million for Gahey with a year left on his contract, which, by the way, is still a great deal for Palace as a club. But obviously, if he had let longer, he would have obviously moved for a lot more. But again, Palace have not bought anyone particularly unbelievable in, so I think Palace are definitely one to consider. You know, when you look at the windows, they're a prime example of a window that I don't think for a team that should panic, and I think Wolves are panicking, to be honest. Briefly mentioned, I don't think it's that much of a cause for concern really, with regards to Wolves' window, because there have been so many that have been pretty subpar as well. Now obviously, with the likes of Crystal Palace, Everton, stuff like that, their squads are initially better than Wolves' one, so of course there's cause for concern there. But even then, for the likes of Fulham fans, I spoke to a Fulham fan recently in one of my videos you can check out on the channel, and he was saying, you know, Fulham leave their business late and they almost pick up the scraps of the players that have looked to move and they haven't got to move, and then ultimately they'll end up at Fulham because they want to move. It's just their clubs haven't come in for them, or talks have broken down, stuff like that. So I think Wolves will be picking up scraps at the end of the window. I think it's arguably not the worst strategy in the world, given the fact that, you know, they do need players in. However, obviously the concern is the Manchester City game, but equally I think most Wolves fans, certainly at the moment, would probably tell you it's pretty much a write-off anyway. You know, when I was at the Celta Vigo game, it was very much sort of, loads of fans by me were sort of, we were discussing it, and that was the same thing. It was very much sort of, yeah, it's a write-off. We'll just move on from City, and then as long as we win the games after that, there's a lot of winnable games in and around that period. So as long as Wolves can get over the line in them games, and have players in by them games, then I think it's okay. I really do. And obviously that's a negative mentality to have, to go in and just be like, oh, let's just throw away the Man City game. Of course not, I'm not saying that, but I do think it's one of them where, again, most fans feel it's a bit of a free hit, and if Wolves, you know, give a good account of themselves in that game, go into that game, do well, perform well, I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue. But as I've said, it's one of them that Wolves fans will still want to win, and Wolves fans still want players through the door, and rightly so. There should have been players through the door, more than there has been already. John Arias, Volfer and Fer Lopez obviously coming in so far this summer, so I do think it's one of them that's really interesting. I do think Wolves need bodies in there. I do think the squads in and around them are better, majority of them, especially for depth. I mean, Everton's depth now is really, really impressive, and they've got some decent players on the bench still, and players, I mean, even players that aren't that great are still pretty much higher level than most of Wolves' bench, which is concerning. But as I've said, I think Wolves need 3 or 4 before the end of the window. I do hope they get 3 or 4. I think they should get 3 or 4. They need midfield depth. They need a striker or a forward that can play the 10 and play the 9. They need a left-sided centre-back. They need a right wing-back. They're the 4 main ones. And then you're looking at depth again. So I do think in terms of depth of squad, and obviously the likes of players at Sasa Kalajic, Hwang Hee-chan, Fabio Silva, players like that, you know, linked to be going this summer. I do think they do need bodies through the door, and it makes complete sense to get those bodies through the door. But whether they do is another question. Let me know what you think, Wolves fans. I think there's been so much sort of thought-provoking stuff going on recently, like I say, with different players and different teams changing players, and teams, quite frankly, not, you know, some of them not living up to the standards their fans would have expected from the window. For example, Crystal Palace, you know, Palace fans would have wanted an unbelievable window off the back of winning the FA Cup and, you know, going into Europe, which we now know is the Conference League. But Palace fans would have wanted to strengthen on the squad they've currently got, and they ultimately haven't. Really, they brought in Borna Sosa as obviously a left wing back option for Tyreek Mitchell, but again, I say it's very underwhelming winner from them. And then obviously you've got Fulham, Everton have massively improved now. Brentford, I think, are going to have a good end to the window, but I do think there's clubs in and around there that are poor. I think Burnley have started to have a better window as well, which is probably why fans are concerned, because I don't think Burnley will stay up. I'd make that abundantly clear, but I do think they've had, you know, the last few weeks, last few days, they've had a lot better players through the door, a lot more sort of attractive propositions popping up and stuff like that. So again, I think it's really interesting with them. If they can strengthen even more, then you've got Sunderland and Leeds have already strengthened, so people do have every right to be concerned. But let me know what you think about this, Wolves fans, because it's been a bit of a mad one so far. I do hope that it does start to pick up soon. Obviously the start to the window was relatively decent, wasn't it? Fer Lopez comes in, the right players leave, in my opinion, really, other than the ones that, you know, people expected Cunha and Aït-Nouri to go, they did so. And then Semedo is the one that's just a bit frustrating. But again, let me know what you think about the window so far, Wolves fans. Let me know what you think about this video. If you did enjoy it, I'd really appreciate it if you would like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment below what you think about the video, and share it with your friends. And I'll see you in the next one.